But are cows really that bad? For this topic, I interviewed Professor of Animal Science and Air Quality Specialist Dr. Frank Mitloehner. What's interesting is how this idea got started.
2006, the FAO published an important report which first brought the link between livestock farming and climate change to light.
The 2006 report that essentially got the world to start blaming cows for our environmental problems was called Livestock's Long Shadow. And Dr. Mitloehner was the person who debunked this report in 2010. Not only that, but the authors of that report actually agreed with him. They said his criticism was fair and that, honestly, he has a point.
My understanding is that the idea that cows are bad for the environment started sometime around 2006 when this report called Livestock's Long Shadow came out. I'm sure you're quite familiar with that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
First of all, the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, wrote a report called Livestock's Long Shadow. Some aspects of the report were done very well, and some of them were done chop. They had some snappy comparisons in there, such as the one comparing livestock to transportation.
The Post sent me a report online published by the United Nations stating that the meat and dairy industry produces more greenhouse gases than the exhaust of all cars, trucks, trains, boats, planes combined.
In their executive summary, they said livestock produces more greenhouse gases leading to climate change than the entire global transportation sector. They also said that livestock globally produces 18% of all greenhouse gases. And so I sat together with my PhD students and we pondered upon it, wondering how in the world can that be? I mean, the numbers seemed high, the comparison seemed wrong. So we looked into this. The problem was that while they used this comprehensive cradle-to-grave, so-called life cycle assessment approach for livestock, meaning they looked at everything from soil to plants to animals, the belching, the manure. They looked at the feed, they looked at the processing of meat and milk and so on, all the way till you put it in your mouth. That's the grave of that product, okay? But they didn't do the same thing for transportation. For transportation, they only looked into tailpipe emissions, not the production of cars and trucks and trains and planes and ships, all the steel, the plastic, the rubber, and so on that goes into making those things. Construction of roads and highways and airports and harbors and so on. None of that was assessed, but only tailpipe emissions. So for livestock, they looked into everything, the so-called life cycle assessment approach, and for transportation, they only looked at tailpipe emissions. That was a classical apples to oranges comparison, which I critiqued in a peer-reviewed publication, and the authors conceded. They agreed with my criticism and took that comparison back. But the horse had left the barn, and since then it's out, roaming freely, and everybody who has a beef with livestock is grabbing it.
The meat and dairy industry,
the livestock sector,
the consumption of beef,
cows, emissions,
greenhouse gases.
Even though the authors had long clarified that that was probably not the right approach.